For revising Unit 1 is called the need for business activity. And it's a no-brainer really, because we need a business for many reasons. And in the exam question, they might say to you, why start a new business? Well, if we start a business, we're creating jobs. And creating jobs is quite a nice little thing to do. Because one day, you're going to need a job for yourself, and another day, you might want to employ your mate. So creating jobs is a fantastic way to not have to worry about finding a job. And Korea, if you watched in the news at the weekend, was talking about people that left Korea are coming back to Korea to create jobs for themselves and their family and other people. So enterprise is massive. If you create jobs, you create what? Create jobs, you create
wealth for others.
Wealth for yourself and for others. So if you're creating wealth for yourself and others, then that's also
wealth
a great
for the local
place.
community as well.
Fantastic. Next slide. So if we're creating wealth for ourselves and others, we're also creating wealth for the local community. Because these people that create the wealth for themselves and others are hopefully going to spend it in the local community to actually grow their businesses that are already there. Yeah.
And if you create wealth for the local community, you'll also be creating wealth for the government.
It's a really
fantastic. So, in terms of the government, they love people making wealth because they can tax wealth, they can take national insurance off wealth, they can take duty out of the wealth, and they can also take, what else can they take?
VAT.
VAT, well done. Well done. So, why do businesses exist is quite straightforward. We run the country. We've covered that already, which is super fast time today. And we've covered that to some extent as well. So in terms of VAT, let's go back. In terms of tax, people that work for other companies, 2-mark question, people that work for other companies pay tax as they earn tax. VAT currently is what percent?
20%.
20% on luxury goods is the VAT that we charge at the moment. And we charge duty on what products?
Petrol, cigarettes and alcohol.
Fantastic. Clearly, in the top of your head, alcohol and cigarettes.
He's just reading off the board.
So,
I'm not, I'm reading out.
It's quite important.
Yes. Yeah, Visa.
It's quite important, question why do businesses exist? Because it costs, as you know, £850 billion a year
to run the UK.
To run the UK PLC. And that cost comes from this collection of taxes. So that is coming from all the money that's generated and spent in the UK so the government can run the other things it has to pay for, such as schools,
yeah.
NHS, armed forces, emergency services, public sector, blah, blah, blah. Next slide, please. And a lot more eloquently than I could have drawn with a whiteboard and a blackboard marker is this economic cycle. Because the more people have money and jobs, the more people have the greater income, and they can actually decide to consume more products. Those products can then force other companies to get into the market and create more products, and the companies in the market can increase their production. So this economic cycle, whether you look at it from create jobs, create wealth for yourself and others, spend it in the local community, and see the tax man take it, that's why businesses exist. Next slide, please. You also, in the exam, need to know about the primary sector and the different sectors of industry. And you know from last year and this year's revision that the primary sector sucks what out of the ground?
Raw materials.
Fantastic. And it's those raw materials that we mine, farm, fish and get out of the forest to put into the secondary sector, who do what with them? Make stuff with them. They add value to them, and that added value product is then sold in shops. So the secondary sector is a very important sector because that takes raw materials, puts them together in a creative way, adds value to those raw materials, and then once they've added value to those raw materials, they can then sell the benefits and features of those new products in the service sector. So that tertiary sector is what takes all those manufactured products that have had value added to them and does something with them. And as a country, we're very good at providing banking services. 70% of our workforce are now in this tertiary sector. Retail. Everybody says retail's having a tough time on the high street, but actually people are still looking for shops, still people are paying rents, and still people are coming up with new ideas. Internet. I moved into my new house recently in the middle of nowhere. Would you believe BT are providing super fast broadband at 85 bits per second in the middle of nowhere? And supermarkets competing very intensely to get their market share. And it's this sector, as you know, that's grown rapidly over the last 50 years. But don't forget, the tertiary sector isn't just made up of private sector businesses. The tertiary sector is also made up of public sector businesses such as, you've already told me, schools, hospitals, defence and emergency services. So it all sits in that sector. And this little word here came up a couple of years ago, 2-mark exam question, knowledge. What does the word interdependence mean? And it means no more than...
Each sector relies on the other.
Each sector, primary, secondary and tertiary, relying on the other. Well done.
It seems so logical.
My example here is, if BP did not pump oil out of the sea, there would be no oil to process at the refinery and to sell at the petrol pump. So it's quite clear that each sector relies on the other. Thank you. You also know, and I've looked at it again in Unit 2, in Year 11, that adding value creates this specialisation. And you also know that doing something that is quite creative with a piece of raw material, and I'll give you an example. At the weekend, I moved into my new house, and I've got one tree in the garden, and on the sunniest day of the year, I wanted to put my hammock up. So what's the best way to put a hammock up with one tree?
You don't.
Plant another tree. You have to wait for that to grow. So I went to the garden centre, I bought a stake,
knock it in the ground.
I bought a stake, knocked it into the ground, put 2 guide ropes on the stake, drilled a hole through the stake, put a chain through the hole to attach my hammock to, attached the other half to the hammock to a straps around the tree, and then ran a line from the tree to take the weight of the main stake to hold it to the tree.
Yeah, but by the time you did that,
Why do you need that?
It didn't start raining, it took me half an hour. Longest part of the trip was going to the point I'm making is, I added value to making half a hammock stand just by sorting the problem out for myself. In terms of specialisation, I can set up a business selling hammock stands for people that have only got one tree in the garden. I could sell that hammock stand for £50 and people would buy it because people like sitting in hammocks in their garden. And that's no more than what every other business that started an enterprise. Ben & Jerry's take no more than half a litre of milk. That half a litre of milk they probably pay no more than 13.5p for. They take the half litre of milk, they add a few other things, probably about 13.5p's worth. They use organic milk, that's a USP. They use nice flavours, that's another USP. They use quirky recipes. But they're only making a custard out of milk, adding some flavour. The total cost is probably less than 50p including the carton. They freeze it at the perfect temperature and they sell that carton for how much when at full price?
£4.99.
£4.99. So they've taken 50p of ingredients and added £4.50's worth of value through specialisation of that product evolution. So, for those people that are going for the analysis, remember the analysis, Mark. Can you discuss the changes in the primary, secondary and tertiary sector over the last whatever? You should be able to say that because raw materials in the UK have been used up, or they're not cheap to get out of the ground anymore, that's meant that coal mines have closed. Fishing has now got quotas on it. Oil prices have fallen. So if it's not profitable to do something, people stop doing it. Whereas the secondary sector, the changes have come about from the fact that machinery and robots have replaced people, where that takes place. And most of the machinery, tobacco companies, tanning companies, has gone abroad, so those works and jobs have been made in another country now. So as foreign competition produces goods and services cheaper, using industry and machinery that we had in this country in the Industrial Revolution, as other countries can do it cheaper, that stops happening here. But as those countries get wealthier, it might come back to the UK, but at the moment it hasn't. So, as we've got to the stage where relocation of manufacturing has gone away, it's not likely to come back unless somebody incentivises that investment, i.e. the government. But, and I say but, Britain, as you know, is starting to fight back by advertising made in Britain. And as people realise that quality products and quality design is what people will pay for, then why should people buy rubbish from abroad where people don't really care? So companies that have taken their production abroad, Laces of Oxford made instruments for aviation. And as they took their production abroad, they found that China were using cheap components in their global product, and the product was losing its reputation for quality. So these people are now panicking, thinking, if we can't manage the quality abroad, we should be bringing the manufacturing back to the UK. Other companies have done similar. Clothing companies have gone abroad. Cigarette companies have gone abroad for new emerging markets, because tobacco smoking in the UK is now frowned upon, even though it generates a lot of tax for the government. And even high-tech companies like Dyson have gone abroad because it's cheaper. But Dyson will find out that quality is not as good. If he's happy with the quality being not as good, he'll stay abroad. But when consumers aren't happy with the quality being not as good, they will stay or think about coming back here. But don't forget, when you're looking at those 6-mark questions, that robots and technology and automation has increased our ability to do the same job quickly without the use of people. So mass production and flow production have evolved as well in those companies that manufacture here. More changes in terms of, if you had a 6-mark question on why is the tertiary sector change, well, similarly, what's driving the tertiary sector is no more important than making your point known that population has grown. And when populations grow in a country, the demands on health and education grow, so more people get employed as teachers and doctors. As people also in the UK get wealthier, what's happened recently in terms of pay?
What's up?
It's gone up from the minimum wage to the living wage. As people get wealthier, they've got more money to spend in shops. We've talked about that. So you don't have to set up a business to have more money to spend in shops. You just need to be working hard. You generate wealth by working hard. By working hard, by doing more work, you generate more wealth. And over time, you get wealthy. So, generating wealth's a great time to spend it. If you've got more wealth, hopefully you've got more time to spend the wealth. And if you've got more time and more wealth, then you can spend it on things like leisure activities. So we see the growth of, in the last 50 years, of things like sports centres, leisure clubs, travel agents, cinemas. So all those things have grown the service sector because the service sector has got more customers with more time and more money. So, as much as you might get a 6-mark question on primary, secondary and tertiary, that should be able to let you get all those 6 marks by pointing on the things we've talked about. But don't presume that people will always have the opportunity to make money. Because if you saw a good profitable business idea, what would you do with it? If you saw my half a stand for a hammock and thought, that's easy, I can make that.
You'd make it and then...
You'd make it for what?
Less money.
For less money, for cheaper. And you start calling your business Hamacology. And you start advertising your for 25 quid, because you get it cheaper, you make it cheaper. So, you're working in a global arena. And everybody in the world is constantly looking for profitable business. Because a profitable business, ladies and gentlemen, attracts competition. Because everybody thinks, I like that idea, I can do it for cheaper. So it's a bit like flies on a piece of smelly fish. A profitable business will attract competitors to try and do it, as you rightly said, for cheaper. Because if you can do it for cheaper, and you can do it for better, you'll take the customers. So never forget that the primary, secondary, tertiary industry are working on a global platform to compete. And if somebody shows you this graph, then we can see that primary over the last 200 years has declined quite a lot. People aren't working on the land as much. Service has grown and taken most of those people, and manufacturing is sort of still holding its own somewhere in the middle. Will manufacturing come back? Let's hope so. Because it's okay being famous for designing great stuff in the UK, but isn't it nice to make stuff in the UK? Yeah.
What does that bottom one say?
The bottom one,
No.
you don't need that bottom one, that's not in your syllabus called tinkering. And these are the big 9-mark questions that I've talked to you about. If you get a 9-mark question on anything to do with starting up a business or changes in the sectors of industry, then I think you should just put the icing on the cake in the following way. Everything changes all the time. Nothing stays the same. If the total number of jobs in the primary and secondary industry continue to fall, we have to find new jobs for those people. Or those people will find new jobs in a different country. So hopefully the tertiary industry will continue to grow to take those new jobs. Whether that's IT, internet. And technology generally every 10 years doubles in speed and its creative ability to do more things and employ more people. Unfortunately, when people leave the primary and the secondary industry, they need often to retrain so they can cope with different jobs in different sectors. And those different jobs in different sectors don't always pay as well as the job they had if they're skilled at it. So to get the pay back up, people need to retrain to do those different jobs so they can earn the same money or more. But bear in mind that if you have to retrain, like I retrained after a career in hospitality, it takes a year to retrain in a professional qualification, it did for me. It takes another year to get work experience and to develop that craft. And you're then at the beginning of a new career, and I would imagine at the start of a new pay structure. So as much as I might have finished another career at the top of the pay structure, to retrain and come into teaching, you start at the bottom of a new pay structure. I think at the time it was 23,500, and you start again. So don't forget that it takes time and costs money before you can replace that salary with a new job and a new career. But it's worth doing it, because if you can identify the skills that people want and train in those skills, you can earn money delivering those skills because people want those skills. So the secret is work out what people want as soon as you can, whether that's at school, at sixth form, in college, university, but don't just do stuff that everybody else is doing. Because if you're doing a degree in a subject that's defunct, by the time you've finished, you'll be an expert in something that nobody wants. You'll still have skills. You'll still be able to research. You'll still be able to write. You'll still be able to analyse data. You'll still be able to pull information together. But that's not the only reason you go to university. So be careful where you develop those skills. And the final point I want to make for the 9-mark question, if you get one, older workers in industry generally need to take, if they do lose their jobs or are made redundant, they generally need to take lower paid work. And older workers are not always keen to retrain to do other subjects. So if you're working in a situation where you've got an older workforce that's about to be made redundant, i.e. the jobs disappear, then those workers might be reluctant to retrain into looking for work in other sectors. So if they become unskilled, or they are unskilled, they will find it hard to retrain. But everybody in this room could be made redundant at least 4 to 5 times in their lifetime. So all I'd say is that's a fact, and if that's going to happen 4 or 5 times to you in your lifetime, get ready to look for opportunities and be prepared to retrain, because you will not have one career for your entire life unless you're an entrepreneur that sets up their own business. Okay? And we've talked about the exam tips in a separate podcast. 33% of the exams on paper 1 and 2 are on the knowledge. 67%, not 76. 67% of what you do with that knowledge in terms of creating that argument for and against, advantages, disadvantages, making that cake and putting the icing on top of it. So, thank you very much for listening.